It was a rainy Thursday night, one of those nights where the world feels heavier than it should. Adam sat alone in his car, parked on the far edge of an empty lot, windshield fogged from the damp air and the heat of his breath. A cardboard box rested in the passenger seat. Inside it, the last pieces of his former life. An old mug, a photo frame with no photo, a stack of notebooks, and the access badge he would never use again. He had been fired that morning. 2 months earlier, his relationship had ended at a quiet, painful implosion. His savings were nearly gone. The debt he'd ignored was now demanding attention he didn't have. He looked at the dim streetlights and whispered, barely audible even to himself, "How did it come to this?" And then a thought cut through the fog in his mind. I have nothing left to hide behind. For the first time in years, he wasn't performing for anyone. He wasn't pretending, explaining, or smoothing things over. He was just a man alone with the truth. A year earlier, Adam's life looked perfectly stable from the outside. Not exceptional, just clean, orderly, presentable. He had a well-paying job in a mid-sized tech company, a modern apartment with polished concrete floors, and just enough minimalist furniture to look intentional. A girlfriend who admired his discipline, colleagues who praised his reliability. People called him things like dedicated, consistent, responsible. They said he was the guy who showed up early, stayed late, and never complained. And Adam repeated the same line when people asked how he was doing. "I'm fine. Everything's good." But beneath the polished exterior, he lived in constant fear of not being enough. He believed that if he slowed down, someone would notice he didn't have it all together. If he said no, someone would replace him. If he showed a crack, everything might fall apart. He built his identity like a fragile sculpture, beautiful from afar, hollow from within. He worked harder than necessary, not because he wanted success, but because he was terrified of failure. He stayed in a relationship not because it brought him peace, but because it made him feel normal. He filled his apartment with expensive things, not because he needed them, but because he needed people to think he was doing well. On the surface, Adam looked like a man winning at life. Inside, he was drifting, disconnected from himself, from others, from truth. Sometimes, late at night, he would sit in the dark living room and feel the emptiness settling around him. There has to be more than this, he'd think. But every morning, he pushed the feeling away and returned to the script. The unraveling didn't happen in a dramatic collapse. It was a slow, quiet erosion, subtle enough that even Adam didn't notice at first. He began waking up more tired than when he went to bed. Small tasks felt heavier. Emails took longer to write. He forgot things, deadlines, meetings, conversations. Sometimes he'd sit at his desk and stare at the screen, unable to remember what he had opened his laptop to do. There were mornings he had to fight the urge to just stay in bed. His chest felt tight more often, though he told himself it was just stress. He stopped going to the gym because he was too busy. He stopped cooking because takeout was faster. He stopped talking to friends because he felt like he had nothing to say. His girlfriend noticed before he did. "You're somewhere else," she told him one night. "You look at me, but you're not here." Adam forced a smile and replied, "I'm fine, just work stuff." But inside, he knew something was wrong. He just didn't know how to name it. At work, small mistakes became common. He missed a data review. He sent a report without checking the numbers. He forgot to respond to a client who had been waiting for days. His manager pulled him aside. "You okay, Adam? You don't seem like yourself." Again, he said the line, "I'm fine." But the truth was unraveling. He felt like he was slowly drowning while everyone around him kept walking. Late at night, he'd sit on the edge of the bed, palms sweating, heart racing, whispering, "What's happening to me?" But he never let the question linger long enough to find an answer. It finally snapped one Tuesday morning. Adam walked into a client presentation, the one he was responsible for, without the updated data. He had forgotten to run the final analysis. He knew it the moment the slide appeared on the screen. Everything inside him went silent. His manager stepped in, salvaged the meeting, and gave him a tight nod that said more than words could. That afternoon, HR asked him to come to a small conference room. The tone was polite, rehearsed. A folder on the table. Two people sitting across from him with sympathetic expressions that didn't reach their eyes. "We've noticed a decline in performance. We've had conversations, but nothing has improved. We have to make a decision. Today will be your last day." They slid the folder forward. Adam nodded mechanically. Inside, something fractured. As he packed his things, he heard a voice in his head. "I knew this was coming. I just didn't want to admit it." He left the building without looking back. The sky felt too bright, too wide, too indifferent. When he got home, silence filled the apartment, the same silence he had ignored for months. He sat on the couch and stared at the wall until the light faded. That evening, his girlfriend, already distant, came over to talk. She sat across from him, hands folded, eyes tired. "I can't do this anymore, Adam. You're here, but you're not here." She paused. "And I don't know how to love someone who's already disappeared." Adam didn't argue. He didn't plead. He just nodded. After she left, he whispered into the empty room, "Maybe I disappeared years ago." The year he lost everything didn't begin with catastrophe. It began with the slow realization that he had been gone long before his life fell apart. A week after losing everything, Adam sat alone in his half-empty apartment, surrounded by boxes he refused to unpack. He looked at the life he had built and felt nothing. He walked to the mirror. For the first time in months, he actually looked at himself. Not the version he presented to others, but the tired, hollow man behind the mask. And the truth hit him. I wasn't living a life. I was maintaining an image. Every achievement had been for approval. Every sacrifice had been for validation. Every routine had been for the sake of appearing stable. What was I trying to prove, he thought, and to whom? There, in that silence, he realized something unsettling. He didn't know who he was without the job, the relationship, the routine. He had spent years constructing a version of himself that looked successful, but had no foundation. The collapse wasn't an accident. It was the inevitable end of a life built on fear. The change didn't start with a grand plan. It started with necessity. Adam moved out of his apartment, he couldn't afford it anymore, and rented a small studio on the edge of town. Peeling paint, creaking floorboards, but cheap. He furnished it with the basics: a bed, a small table, one lamp.
It felt strangely honest. He canceled subscriptions, stopped buying takeout, started cooking plain meals, rice, chicken, vegetables. He walked every morning, not to get fit, but to clear the fog in his head. The cold air stung his lungs in a way that reminded him he was still alive. One morning during a walk, he murmured out loud, "I don't know where this goes, but I can't go back." He began therapy a few weeks later. The first session was awkward. He didn't know how to talk about himself without performing. But slowly he opened up. He talked about the fear, the exhaustion, the constant pressure to appear in control, the emptiness he carried like a shadow. His therapist told him something he didn't expect. You don't lack discipline, you lack kindness toward yourself. The words unsettled him. Kindness to myself? What does that even look like? He started journaling small truths. I'm tired. I'm scared. I don't know who I want to be. I want to change. He took a freelancing job designing simple graphics, something he had dabbled in years before without pressure. It paid little, but when he completed the first project, he felt a spark he hadn't felt in months. Maybe I can build something new, he thought. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't running, he was rebuilding. Slowly, messily, but honestly. With a bit of mental clarity returning, Adam realized he needed structure. Not the old kind built on fear, but a new kind built on intention. He opened a blank notebook and wrote, "Let the old identity die." He didn't want to be the overachiever constantly burning out. He didn't want to be the man who couldn't say no. He didn't want to live by expectations that weren't his. Then he wrote, "Health first, always. Sleep, nutrition, movement, therapy, non-negotiable." He scribbled another line, "Consistency before ambition. No more extreme goals, no 90-day transformations, no pressure to catch up. Just daily intentional effort." He dedicated time to learning design more seriously. Colors, topography, storytelling through visuals. And he added copywriting, realizing communication had always intrigued him. Every morning he worked on a skill. Every afternoon he applied it. Every evening he reflected. He reorganized his finances, painful but necessary. He mapped his debt, created a realistic budget, stopped pretending the numbers were temporary. He told himself, "You don't need to win. You just need to not quit." For the first time in his adult life, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was growing for himself.
6 months passed quietly. There was no sudden breakthrough, no dramatic success, just gradual progress. His sleep improved, his anxiety softened. He felt less scattered, more grounded. He wasn't fixed, just more aware, more present. He built a small client base, steady work, enough to pay bills without panic. He learned to communicate clearly, to set boundaries, to say no. He still doubted himself sometimes. He still felt fear. He still had days where the old exhaustion returned. But now he recognized the signs. He rested before he broke. He asked for help before shutting down. He listened to his needs before ignoring them. He didn't become a new person. He became a more honest version of who he already was. One evening he sat in his tiny studio, soft lamplight flickering across the walls, and felt a quiet sense of pride, not for what he had accomplished, but for who he was becoming. "I'm still scared," he admitted to himself, "but I'm not lost anymore."
It wasn't glamour, it wasn't triumph, it was maturity, earned through pain, reflection, and relentless honesty. Looking back, Adam realized something unexpected. He didn't lose everything in one year. He lost it slowly, over many years, piece by piece, because he ignored himself. He lost his health because he pushed too hard. He lost his relationship because he wasn't emotionally present. He lost his job because burnout consumed his ability to function. He lost his sense of self because he hid behind performance for too long. The collapse wasn't a tragedy. It was a message, a brutal, necessary awakening. And the rebuild happened the same way, slowly, piece by piece, through small, consistent steps. He learned that the world doesn't fall apart all at once, and people don't rebuild all at once either. He learned that crisis isn't the end, it's the clearing of old identity. And he learned that the most important relationship he had neglected was the one with himself. One quiet morning, a full year after his life collapsed, Adam stood outside watching the sunrise. The world looked the same as it always had: gray buildings, cold air, distant traffic, yet he felt different. He whispered, "I didn't lose everything. I lost what wasn't real." Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what was never lost: yourself. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel. If you're navigating your own transition or simply learning from the journeys of others, you're not alone. Join us for more stories that go deeper than the surface.